Afternoon. My name is Richard, and today I have what is hopefully going to be a really interesting battle report for you guys. So what you're watching here is a game between two of our locals, Paul and Jim. Paul is going to be playing Convergence, and Jim is going to be testing the Crucible Guard. Because Jim has a ton of proxies, I'm going to go through them first. So first off, Gorman is Silvestro. His proxy jacks, which you can tell because they have a little bits of paper taped to them. There are two Toros in there, and then one of the other heavies. He has a unit of press gangers, which are actually correct. He's got a unit of bastions that are playing the assault troopers. He's got a white unit of infantry, which are Crucible Guard infantry. And then the large white-looking bases are two Dragon's Breath rockets. And I believe pretty much everything else is correct. So you have probably already noticed that I've got a strange interface for this battle report. What you're looking at is my master's project for computer science at Rochester Institute of Technology. And the idea is an enhanced battle reporting piece of software. So this was recorded off of my laptop. It is all live. So everything you're about to see is done in real time and could easily be live streamed. And it also includes the ability to do all the stuff you're about to see in review. I'm recording this audio after the fact because I forgot to bring a mic to the game store. So we're going to get to the interesting stuff in the software in a second. But first I'll go through Jim's list real quick. He's playing Silvestro with a Retaliator, two Toros, Bosun Grogspar, Prospero with a Suppressor, a Trancer, Crucible Guard Assault Troopers, Crucible Guard Infantry with UA, two Dragon's Breath Rockets, and Press Gangers Max. So generally when someone is doing one of these battle reports, they can't give you a lot of great information because they lack information. They're watching a video and they can't quite tell everything. One of the biggest problems is that you can't ever judge distances from this view. So I've solved that problem. We can go in here and we can select a large base model, and then in this field we can put any distance we want, and it will display that measurement. So bam, there is 5 inches away from that model. I'm sure you can immediately tell that this should be able to really enhance the battle report process, as well as in live streams. I mean, if you're privateer press and you're streaming one of these, now your announcers can give really great feedback on the board state and what players' options are, and really improve the process for the viewer. I'm not going to pretend to be the greatest for game knowledge or anything like that, so this battle report, the audio, honestly, will probably be pretty mediocre. But hopefully what my software is doing here will really improve the experience for you, even though I'm not the best. So I already went through Jim's list. I'm going to go through Paul's Convergence list real quick here. Paul is playing the Eminent Configurator Orion. He has an Assimilator, 3 monitors, a Cipher, a Diffuser, a Corollary, 3 Elimination Servitors, an Attunement Servitor, a Reflex Servitor, and 2 Optifex Directives. So Paul has already deployed. Jim is throwing down his deployment at the moment. So yeah, we'll see what happens. So I also need to apologize for how jittery the video is. I'm recording this on my very poor laptop at the game store, so if you're doing this on any form of good hardware, it won't be this jittery for you at all. So I apologize for that. So that's all of Jim's regular deployment. Passes the clock to Paul, who's going to go do his advanced deploy for the servitors. Paul is in the Destruction Initiative theme. Jim is in Magnum Opus. So just going through Paul's deployment real quick. The medium jack all the way up the top is the diffuser. Then we have a monitor, and then a cipher. And then the next dude down from that is Orion. Then we have the corollary, 2 more monitors, and finally the assimilator. All the small bases in there are assorted servitors. It's worth noting that all of the blank bases for Paul are his elimination servitors. Over on Jim's side, the large base at the very top is his Dragon's Breath rocket. Then we have a unit of Crucible Guard infantry. We have his light jack, whose name I am forgetting. The Retaliator. Then the 2 Toros have giant pieces of paper stuck to them. And then the Suppressor, which is on Prospero. Then we've got the Rocket Men. And then in front of them, advanced deploys Jim's unit of press gangers. So you'll notice that up in the top left, I have logged an image. So what that does is that lets us, after the game, go back and review it. So for instance, if you record your games at the game shop this way, you could bring it home and review it that night and try and figure out what you did wrong and what you could do to improve. It really will allow you to basically improve your play by reviewing your games and having enough information from these images to actually be able to figure out what you did wrong. You'll be able to see what was in range of things. It's better see what your options were compared to your time at the game table. So Paul is taking advantage of the fact that his jacks get repositioned by doing the sweet trample and reposition combo, getting his heavies as far forward as he can. He really needs to take a lot of board space against Jim's wall of dudes. I admit I forgot to ask what objectives they took, but I'll spoil it for you. None of them were relevant. On the Warcaster's activation, Paul puts up Avenging Force. But other than that, he's just running everything forward. So here we can see I've selected one of the press gangers because I wanted to get a feel for what they were going to be able to do in their next turn. So that's a 12-inch ring. So that's pretty much his run range for them, which lets us know that, I mean, he's going to be able to ram those press gangers directly into that zone and just start jamming it almost immediately. He could also run and engage that random server in the forest if he wanted to, but there's no real reason to do that. So this is checking the ranges for the heavies, basically pointing out that with their 8-inch melee threat, pretty much Jim is going to run his press gangers in and clearly be in melee threat. At 17 inches, that's its range threat, so it pretty much has run of the board at this point in terms of its targets for range attacks next turn. And similarly with the other heavies on the top, anything Jim advances is going to be in range to be shot the following turn. So that's the end of Paul's turn, start of Jim's turn. Once again, I make sure to log that image so that when we go back and review this game in the future, we'll have that point as a reference. I mean, so once again, the ability to check ranges really improves this, and obviously if I was doing this audio live for real, I could have much improved commentary based on the ability to tell you ranges perfectly. And at certain points in this game, the players actually ask me to check ranges for them because at one point measuring the Warcaster's control range is just obnoxious with all the bases in the way, and so I was able to give them a quick number. This software is never meant to replace at table judgments. Obviously you should always believe your measuring stick over me drawing a line. But in all of my tests, I've been very accurate. I haven't been off by more than 1/4 of an inch ever, really. So here I'm checking the ranges on the Dragon's Breath rockets. They've been a pretty big deal in the other times Jim has tested Crucible Guard, so I wanted to see what they were threading. The answer is a lot because their range is pretty massive. So for Jim's activation, he starts by running his Warcaster up into the zone. Well, not running, sorry. Advancing his Warcaster into the zone. He throws up Admonition on one of the Warjacks and Transmutation on the Press Gangers. So once again, checking that range threat. So where Jim currently puts his Warcaster is definitely in range of at least 2 of Paul's Warjacks. So if he was catastrophically unlucky, the 2 Warjacks could come in and just take pot shots at his caster. Admittedly, the objective is in the way there, so he's pretty safe from those 2 lower Warjacks, but once again, because I have easy access to that information, that's something I can tell you. So Jim runs the Press Gangers forward. He gives them super tough and essentially just starts jamming Paul. So here you can tell with their melee threat on the following turn, they're going to be able to threaten most of Paul's zone, giving them, you know, they need to be dealt with. Jim follows that up by running his rocket men forward. So obviously a ton of these guys are in range of the jack, even its melee range. That is one of the monitors. So here we can also note that the assimilator is in range of a ton of stuff, and its ability to shred infantry is generally very good with the, I think it's ground pounder. Yeah, ground pounder should hopefully be able to shred a bunch of press gangers with ground pounder. So Jim tries to throw a rocket, it's short. And the press gangers get good stuff. I forget which model is passing that out, but it makes them even more annoying to kill. So you can notice this range check here also reflects the fact that Jim was just short for that rocket shot. And I mean, that's a 14-inch ring that is very accurate. And I mean, rarely do you actually need accurate measurements of more than 14 inches, but as I said, I think the max I checked was 25 inches, and it was dead on even at that massive of a distance, so the range estimations are very accurate. I also apologize for how this is cut off a little bit. Nothing goes past that lower section of the zone that is cut off, so it was never relevant in filming. So Jim ends his turn, passes the clock. Check ranges on these heavies. So it looks like, if I'm measuring 17, so that's the monitor. It looks like he should be able to hit the Dragon's Breath rocket if Paul chooses to go for that. It could also just shoot a bunch of little dudes. By a bunch, I mean one, because I'm pretty sure that's just a single shot. Yeah. So both of these monitors have range to pretty much everything, though admittedly the lower monitor being in the water is going to be slowed down, so it won't quite get to the full 17 inches, but they have their pick of targets. Unfortunately, if Paul doesn't want to get jammed out, he's probably going to have to pick off some press gangers. So he's going to start rolling some dice. So here we can see Paul is throwing out the defense debuff. Yeah, the flare shots from his attunement servitors. So he wants to debuff those press gangers as much as he can. He ends up catching. He gets the flare debuff on at least 3 of the press gangers, 3 scatters. So here Paul is checking for kill box as well as line of sight to the press gangers for moving Orion. He has that sweet gun that pulls everything in. Which, in combination with the assimilator shot, should murder a whole bunch of press gangers. So you can see that at 12 inches he has his pick of targets in that, so he goes for the sweet shot right there in the center. That's going to pull in a whole bunch of press gangers, which should line up for an awesome assimilator shot to really clear that mess out. The press ganger that Orion hit directly tuft, and then servitors try, but one misses and the other tufts model. The last servitor there digs in on the very edge of the zone, and yet another servitor misses. So the servitors do nothing. So you can see that set of servitors is going to have easy range to the press gangers as well. Paul moves back over to this other side. That servitor at the top also hops up and then digs in, hiding there behind that rock so that it will never lose control of the zone. That servitor scoots over, takes a shot, ends up killing one guy, I believe. Yeah, nope. Cypher advances. He's gonna throw a shot into the infantry. So he kills one dude there with the first Cypher shot. It has reload, so it's gonna throw a rough AoE next. He targets the heavy down into the zone. Obviously short, so it's gonna scatter. So that rough scatters up essentially into the forest, which is mostly irrelevant. Up there it's not going to slow down any of the heavies at least, which poses a bit of a problem, but the monitor advances. It's going to take a shot at that Toro. Easily in range of the Toro. So the monitor did hit the Toro, but it failed to damage. So at this point, I note that the next monitor down is also in range of that same Toro. So if he wants, he can try and focus fire it a little bit, knock some boxes out before he has to deal with it up close. So at this point, I'm going to briefly demonstrate one of the other sweet features, checking the line of sight. So during the setup of the game, I defined that as a forest. So if you check line of sight, you can click and you notice that the house completely blocked line of sight, and the forest you could see partially into it. That was a little rough because of how the image recognition works for that stuff. But it is fully dynamic, so this isn't terrain that I pre-programmed to be recognized. Basically, during the setup, I told it that this area of the board was a forest. So that's another piece of information that a caster sometimes doesn't quite, sorry, not a caster, an announcer doesn't quite have perfect access to. And with this software, it gives them the ability to say definitively, yes, from this spot, I can see this model. So the monitor here decides to not move much, and instead ends up shooting a press ganger and killing it. The last monitor takes a shot at the Toro. It deals a point of damage. Repositions over a little bit. So now this is Paul lining up his sweet ground pounder shot. He's going to catch a whole bunch of guys in it. I couldn't tell if there were 4 or 5 in the ground pounder AoE. Paul ends up rolling it out though and only kills 1 due to a combination of missing, tough, combination of missing and tough.
So at this point, Paul's kind of in a bad spot because while those press gangers aren't absurdly strong, with the debuffs Jim has access to, they can be quite good. So he blocks with the servitors a little bit. And I believe a couple servitors killed press gangers there. So now we've got the start of Jim's next turn. So this is bottom of 2. So scoring can begin now. Paul didn't get anything into Jim's zone to help contest. So Jim already has 1 point secured. So we'll see what he can do to nab some more. So this is just another brief demonstration of how checking line of sight works. So for instance, from this light jack here, you can see that forest blocks a pretty huge amount of real estate, but it can totally still see both of those heavies. So that's going to give it 2 very juicy targets. And since that jack is the one that can throw out oil, and all those Crucible Guard infantry are fire typed, it's going to be able to really help bring down those heavies. So Jim starts off by charging this servitor in the forest. And ends up killing it pretty trivially. He then uses, I'm not sure if it was overtake or reposition or what, but he uses an after attack movement to hop himself into the zone, so he's now contesting Paul's zone. So if nothing else changes, Jim will be up by 1 at the end of this turn. So that model Jim just moved up was his Warcaster. So he's pretty far forward now. While Silvestro is up there, he's gonna feat. But if we take a look, Jim moving that far forward is pretty risky. So literally all of the heavies are in range of him now, by a pretty wide margin for range attacks at least. I didn't note how much focus Jim is camping, but that's still not the safest place to be for a Warcaster. Fortunately, Jim has enough heavies right there that he should be able to block line of sight to it without too much trouble. So Jim's going to activate his light next. That is a Retaliator. It's going to move forward and throw an oil spray at the jack right in front of it. Definitely in range of the 8 inches. So here Jim is charging the... Sorry. So Jim's Toro there is going to charge the Cypher. I'm not measuring from the Toro because the giant piece of paper kind of ruins its profile, and so I'm unable to actually find it to range check from it. But he does make the charge, no problem. He's going to roll this out and end up dealing 15 total damage to the Cypher. Paul checks engagement there. The monitor is not engaging the Toro, so it's free to move via the upkeep Avenging Force. We'll let it move at the start of Paul's turn. So Jim's going to activate the Dragon Breath rocket now. Gonna try and shoot this dug-in servitor in the corner. Dug in behind the rock though, it's defense 1,000,000, so I'm pretty sure Jim misses. So at this point, the players are trying to figure out if the Dragon's Breath rocket is still in Silvestro's control range. So they asked me to check it, because that's easier than laying lines down over all these things, and I note that he is in fact out of the control range there. So that means the Dragon's Breath rocket is not going to benefit from the feat. Same with its little carbine buddies. So Jim does end up missing this servitor with it. Oh, I'm sorry, he was shooting at the engaged heavy and scattered way off, not the other way around. That unit then repositions back. So next Jim advances his Crucible Guard infantry in. It's worth remembering that these guys have a fire-typed range attack, and that the lower of those two heavies is oiled. There are also a few of them in range of the mechanics in the back. So he has his choice of a couple different very juicy targets. He's trying to figure out which dudes are actually in range in the back. It's hard to tell from this angle because the jack's arm and body overhang its base enough that you can't quite tell. It is decided that he's only going to get 7 shots. But that's still a respectable amount of boosted damage into the foiled jack. At this point we double check control, note that that entire unit is still in it, which means he's going to be getting, I believe that feat is currently extra dice to hit. Excuse me. So Jim proceeds to throw a whole bunch of shots. He sets that warjack on fire, and ends up doing 5 points, then 7 points, then 4 points, then another 7 points, then a 3-pointer. So that's 26 damage. So really puts the hurt on the monitor. The last 2 dudes make a CRA into the Cypher because they have War Tempered, which lets them make CRAs into combat. This one ends up getting shield guarded, but that's not going to be for a little bit as Jim rolls out the attacks on the monitor. So here comes that CRA I was talking about. Paul chooses to shield guard because he remembers that servitors can do that. We also, or I note here that he actually had a shield guard for the monitor as well. So he could have pulled at least one of those attacks off the monitor and kept it in quite a bit better shape, probably. So the the suppressor is coming in here. It's going to spray down some servitors. To spray 8. So you can see that that's going to easily catch 2 or 3 servitors, depending on positioning of the spray template. So that spray definitely knocks out a few servitors. So now Bosun is gonna go. Is that how you say that name? Bosun. Bosun advances, scatters an AoE at him. So with that scatter, he knocks out that servitor, which means there's only one left controlling the zone. It's down on the very bottom of your screen. There's only one left contesting the zone, sorry. So now the press gangers are going to charge. They pretty much have their choice of targets. One of them goes into the monitor there, and then 3 of them go into the assimilator. So you notice that not only does he have several guys engaging him, engaging the jacks in the zone, but he's also got one press ganger just barely towing it. He also has whatever that model is in the forest directly above it, also towing that zone. So he's doing a pretty solid contesting job right here. So Jim throws some attacks into the jacks there. The monitor takes 6 points. And then the assimilator ends up dying on a series of very hot rolls. But this is still under Silvestro's feet, so they're getting some assistance from that. Down the assimilator goes. So, in the last turn, Paul failing to kill a whole bunch of press gangers with that assimilator shot really hurt him there. He really should have had like half the number of press gangers in his face, but his dice just ruined it for him. So the assimilator died for its failure. So Jim now runs his assault troopers forward. And then Paul's going to take the opportunity to countercharge a servitor in there. He doesn't end up doing any damage to it, or any damage to the rocket man that charged in, ran in. But Jim still has the Dragon's Breath rocket left. So he's going to advance it and shoot the rocket man in the back there and hope that he can kill the servitor in the AoE damage. If he does, Jim is going to be able to score this zone as well as his own zone. So Jim does manage to kill that servitor. So he's going to end his turn and go to 2. He is contesting Paul's zone, so Paul stays at 0. So this is now top of 3. First thing first, Avenging Force will trigger, which is going to let him scoot the, I believe it's the monitor. Yes, he's going to scoot the monitor and take a shot with it. Shot deals a point of damage to the Toro in combat, but not much. So Paul's going to activate Orion next. Orion configures for Matt this turn, and he's going to feat. So Paul uses the spell Force Induction on his jacks right there, hoping to clear out some of those press gangers. Unfortunately, Jim toughs 3 of them, so it's pretty useless. So here we can see the ranged threat on these jacks if they somehow manage to clear those press gangers out before their activation. Once again, they still pretty much have their pickup targets, but Jim has blocked line of sight with his 2 heavies there to his caster. So it would be a real trick to actually get line of sight. He would need to somehow clear the press gangers and drop one of those jacks before he could even attempt an assassination. So Ryan advances. He's going to take a shot at the engaged Toro, but he misses. here we're checking to see what all Orion can see, and he can clearly see that Drac that he shot at. So the mechanics are going to activate next. They walk up to do their repair rolls. They heal 4 to the Cypher, and 8 to the Monitor. So with 5-inch walking threat, the Monitor has easy access to both that light and the heavy. So it's going to be able to go in and do some damage. Instead, down below, a Servitor kills a Press Ganger, and that unit of mechanics moves up and heals 8 points on the damaged Monitor. That Servitor charged in and smacked Jim's model in the forest. Or no, first Servitor misses, second Servitor charges in, does it again. This one succeeds, which causes that model to explode. That is I believe it's a 3-inch AoE when that guy explodes. So the distance measurement ring doesn't work super well in this situation because it's distance from the edge of the base, and obviously a 3-inch AoE is 3 inches total across. But if you had those numbers written down as a reference, you could definitely check that distance from the model very easily. didn't record what Paul is doing here. Because I thought those monitors activated later. But maybe not. So that might be the monitor crushing a random press ganger. This is the diffuser taking a shot at the press ganger, who unfortunately toughs. So then the monitor advances into combat with both the suppressor and the Toro. Oh, I'm sorry, I understand what happened before. So the monitor was actually shooting at the suppressor before to deal 5 and then 18 damage to the suppressor, which is the lower monitor. Then the diffuser attacked. Then the other monitor advances into the Toro and the Retaliator up in the top half of the map. The monitor deals 11 points, then 3 points, then 6 points to the Toro, and then repositions a little farther in. Then the Cypher goes. Cypher is going to advance such that it is engaging the Toro and 2 of the infantry. He starts swinging on the Toro. He deals 9 points. And then with his second attack, kills it. Then with his 2 remaining focus, he's going to mulch 2 of those infantry. Then Paul activates his last poor little servitor, who's going to take a shot at some more Crucible Guard infantry, and kills 1 more out of that squad. So at the end of that turn, Paul was unable to contest Jim's zone, which puts him at 3. Since the zone is uncontested, that means he only needs Since the zone is uncontested, he'll also score it again at the end of his turn, which would put him to 4-0. So Jim just needs to score one more element. So he has several options for that. So first off, the Dragon's Breath rocket is just out of range of Orion, but just in range of the objective. So he's got some firepower on the objective. He could also throw it into Heavy Jacks if he decides he doesn't want to win this game. Both of Jim's heavies here in the center. End up being in charge range of the objective or any of Paul's heavies. However, there is that one press ganger in the way, but he can. No, I believe that is a servitor that's in the way. So he would need to clear out that servitor first, but both of those heavies can probably get into the objective if they want. Going back to the Dragon's Breath rocket, it is also, as I said, in range of the objective, but also in range of the few things that are contesting that lower zone. Specifically, there are 2 servitors there contesting. All of the assault troopers are also, while not quite in range of the objective, they're all definitely in range of those servitors. As well as those press gangers that are right there. So Jim is taking his time to close this out. When you've got time on the clock, don't throw the game away over a silly mistake. So Jim is going to start by taking his press gangers and throwing them into these servitors. So he gets 2 charges into this one servitor. Who he removes. So at this point, Jim needs to clear out one more servitor. Rocket Man gets in there. And the servitor is clearly within his 2-inch melee range. And Jim kills it. So that's game. I hope you guys enjoyed the mediocre battle reporting, and I hope you found my software to be at least interesting, if not maybe useful. Below you will find a link to a video with more in-depth demo of the software. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good one.